Hi, welcome to the OKTA Fine Grain Authorization Technical Dive. In this section, we're going to actually go through different parts. So the first one, we're going to start with what is OKTA FGA, and we're going to do a generic demo on this. And then we're going to jump to section 2, which is the architecture. And then we're going to talk about modeling and how you can build a demo, and we'll show a demo how we can do that. And then finally, we're going to talk about the API. So let's start with section number 1. So what is FGA? So if I can summarize FGA in one statement, it will be this. FGA is an authorization platform. So FGA, if you guys don't know already, it means fine grain authorization. It's the new platform that Okta created for authorization. FGA has nothing to do with authentication. It actually works only for authorization. So where's FGA in the architecture of your authentication authorization of your app? So let's just take a look first, take a step back and see before FGA how authorization happened, and then after FGA how the authorization will happen after that. So the first slide here, I want to talk about authentication authorization using your identity provider. So talking about Okta CIC or CIS or any other identity provider, whatever Ping or Microsoft or any other identity provider, the user usually authenticate your identity provider, do the authentication and the authorization. So usually inside the provider, you can add a role. Actually, Okta CIC, formerly known as Zero, can take it actually a step further, and they can also add permissions to the user after they log in. So this way the user can log in through the identity provider, whatever it's an OIDC or SAML, the identity provider can add the user role into the SAML assertion or the token that will be sent to your application. And as I said, as you take a step further, they can also add permissions where role can be mapped to permission, and you can add the role and the permission inside either the token or the SAML assertion. So you can see here, the identity provider takes care of the authentication and the authorization. Now, if you're going to use Okta FGA now, you're going to actually use the identity provider only for authentication. So forcing multi-factor password management, everything is going to happen through the identity provider. But then after you log into your app, your application will be calling the API of FGA for authorization data. So for example, I log in and the application want to know what pages they can render. They can call FGA with my user ID, and FGA will respond back if I have permission to see a certain page that needs to be rendered or not. So the FGA will interact directly with your application. Another design actually, which is I have customers, they talk to me about, they're like, we do not want our application to talk directly to FGA. What we need the Okta CIC to actually talk to FGA and add the permission inside the token. That's very doable. So you guys know in Okta CIC, there is the actions. And when the user do the authentication, there is the post login action that you can basically call the API of FGA, get the permission, add it in the access token, all the SAML assertion, and send it to your application. The drawback on this is that if the permission change in the FGA, it won't reflect in your app because the permission get added to the token, and your application only get the permission from the token. So if the user logged in and the token is still valid and the permission change in the FGA, the user will still have the old permission until that token expire or the user sign out and get a new token. All right. So now let's just discuss more. Well, there is two model now. I can do authorization with my identity provider, but now I also can do it with FGA. What's the difference? So if I can summarize this in two statements, is the identity provider used something called RBAC, role-based access control. FGA used a model called REBAC, relational-based access control. So I want to explain the difference between RBAC and REBAC. And I found out the best way to do this is to give you an example, right? So my example is basically to create an expense report application. So think about developer got um, a request to actually create an expense report application. Employee can submit expense report. Their manager can approve it. Very straightforward. But if the manager is not available, the manager of the manager can approve it. So my example here, I have Chaz. He report to Lee. Lee report to Kane. If Lee is not available, then Kane can approve any expense report submitted by Chaz. So let's see how a developer can solve this authorization model uh, using RBAC and REBAC. So using RBAC, and this example, I'm actually using OKTA CIC. So you go on OKTA CIC, you create two roles, approver and submitter. For the approval, you add some permissions. So something like approve expenses, view expenses. For a submitter, you add some other permission, like they can also submit permission, they can view the permission and so on. And then basically you have those two roles, and then you can assign those roles to the user. So you're going to come to Chaz. Chaz can be a submitter because he can submit expense report. Lee is an approval because she can approve expense reports. Ken is an approval as well because he can approve expense report. The problem now is if Lee is not available, how the developer can define can approve any report coming from Chaz and not other report coming from other employees not in their under their hierarchy. So to do this, developer needs to do workaround, check the organization tree, because basically Lee and Kim, both of them are approval, but to make sure can only approve employees under their trees, you're gonna get involved other system to make sure that's the tree under Keen and they can approve anyone under them. So it requires more work, more custom work, and we're talking about very simple use case here. So rollback access control is very good when it comes to be a very flat authorization that require permission role. But once you have hierarchy, once you have conditional permissions, that's when our back is not going to be the best approach to do permissioning, since it requires some workarounds. Usually also with RBAC, you're gonna find that you always want to check if a specific user have can perform a specific action on an object. So in my case here, you can see always your application is asking, is Kane can perform approving for the expense report on this report or not? So that's how RBAC work. You're checking if the user has a permission versus the reback we're going to talk about in the next slide is always talking if I have relationship to that report or not. And that actually helps you to have more flexibility to create your authorization model. So let's talk about the reback model now. So in the reback model, you're going to go to FGA, you're going to write your authorization model. We're going to talk in other sessions how you can do that. But after you write your authorization model, inside the authorization model, you have one line, you can write it, which is say, a manager can manage other managers, and as an approval, as long as I manage that person, I can approve it. Just single one line of code in your authorization model that will allow you to allow Kane to approve the reports of Chaz. So usually you can see here, your application will ask FGA, does Kane have a relationship as an approval to this report? So what's happening is FGA build a tree of approving. It has first the report. The report has a relationship to Chaz as a submitter. And then Lee has a relationship to Chaz as a manager, and Ken has a relationship to Lee as a manager. And based on the authorization model I built, Ken, since he's a manager to Lee, they can approve the report that is submitted by Chaz. So just one line of code and authorization model, you will able to build this hierarchy. Your application asks a single question to FGA, FGA respond back, yes, they can approve it, and boom, you can actually allow this to happen without any workarounds. All right. The other thing also I want to make sure of, you can actually use a reback model to build RBAC model. And we're going to see this actually in the modeling section. And not just RBAC. There is the ABAC model. If you want to build a attribute-based access control or role-based access control using reback, FGA allows you to do this. So even though you're using FGA, you're not stuck only to create relation. If you want to still use RBAC model or ABAC model, you still can build this and using reback and FGA. And we'll show this in the upcoming sections. All right, so final thoughts here. Now you're having the authorization using IDP and authorization using FGA. And you can see that IDP usually stuck to role-based access control, which FGA can do role-based access control, reback, like relational-based access control. And through relational-based access control, you can do RBAC or ABAC. On the IDP, it's good for simple authorization. So if you have, for example, roles map to permission, assign it to user. You don't have a hierarchy, you don't have conditions. RBAC can be good enough. That's one thing. The other thing also, the permission for the RBAC using the IDP does not change after the user login. So let me give you an example. If I assign in the expense report example for the lead to be a manager and she is an approval and she's logged in and she can approve expense report, if I immediately change her from being an approval to submitter, that won't affect in her current session because she already got the token from the identity provider to do the approval. The token need to expire to get a new one with the new permission from the identity provider, or Lee needs to sign out and sign in again. While with FGA, you don't have this problem because your application call FGA API anytime they request if the user has a permission to perform a certain action. So uh, that means if it change in FGA, it's immediately change in your application. The other good thing about FGA as well, it have any level of granularity, can build hierarchy, can provide any level of authorization to your application. Um, the other thing also, which is can be a drawback from FGA, is it actually can be too complex to the point that a simple authorization use case to build a reback model would be too complex for that. That's why we actually offer in FGA the RBAC model and ABAC. So maybe you can just stick with the RBAC design in FGA, and this way you can still get the benefit of having runtime change of authorization, but you still use an RBAC model. All right. So FGA is basically a product, as we said, they're using relational-based access control. And using relational-based access control, you can build RBAC or ABAC model. The product itself, Okta did not build that product from scratch. This product actually was built by Google. We took the open source product, we hosted in our cloud, and we made it available for our customers. The same model, actually, Google used it for Google Drive and YouTube. So if you actually using Google Drive or YouTube for change permission on videos or folders, you're basically using OpenFGA. All right, so that's a quick summary for the FGA. And I want to just first, before digging more on the other sections, I want to do a quick demo for end user experience between using identity provider authorization versus using FGA for authorization. So as an example, I'm using here Lexmark. So Lexmark is a printing company. They sell printers. But in this demo, I want to actually demo that they also, on the top of the printer, they sell a portal where the companies who buy their printers, they can use the portal to manage those printers. So let's imagine a company called ABC. They bought the printers. They actually bought the management service for their portal, and an IT manager can log in to Lexmark portal and they can check all the printers. They can assign certain department or certain employee to use specific printers. They can assign permission like view printers or manage printer to certain employees. So we're gonna log in with two personas. We have Alexis as an IT manager, and also we have Tony. He's just an employee, and we're gonna see how the authorization from identity management work and the authorization from the IDP work. I'm mixing both in the same demo so you can see the difference between the two. So let's jump to the demo right now. So I'm going to go to my Chrome browser here, and I'm gonna first log in with Alexis. And Alexis is actually an IT manager. So I'm gonna click login, and that would take me to the Auth0 page. And I'm gonna add Alexis email, add passwords, and now I'm logged into my demo environment, right? So in my account page, this is an IDC application. In my account page, I want to show what Okta CIC sent your application. And you can see here there's an ID token. I want to focus more on the access token. So that's the access token that your application get from Okta CIC. That's uh, the token and decrypted what's inside it. And you can see here, Okta CIC said this user is an IT manager. And under IT manager, they have this permission is to add users, edit user, view dashboards. Those permissions, if I actually went now to the console and change permission or change the role, this token, as long as it's not expired, it will always stay the same unless that token expire or I log in and log on again and get a new token. So that's authorization through the IDP. In this case is Okta CIC. So let's see how the FGA works, right? So I'm gonna go on the dashboard here. And on the dashboard, this is my organization dashboard. And you can see here I have all the printers. So Alexis can actually go to Tony, which is the employee. And you can see here Tony's role is an employee. And she can actually go under printer. And by clicking on this, I'm actually calling FGA API to get all the printer that Tony has access to. So when I click on this one, FGA responded back immediately and said, for permission can use printers, Tony has access to those printers. For permission can manage printers, they have access to those three printers here, right? The other thing was FGA, you can do auditing. So I can go, for example, on a printer and I can do for printer one, FGA tell me every single user in my organization that can use that printer. And if I click here, FGA is going to respond back with the name of the user that can use that printer. Or I can actually go and say, I want the user that can manage and use the printer one. And those are the user that has the two permissions. So you can also use FGA to do certain auditing on certain permission on a specific entity. All right. Let's see now, I'm going to log on the other browser as Tony, and we're going to see the review at that site. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to add Tony. Right. And I'm logged into my browser now. All right. So under Tony here, same thing. I got my account page, which shows what I got from Okta CIC. You can see here my role as an employee and my permission through my roles is only to view the dashboards. And as a good example to this, if I actually went back here and I went under Tony, and I'm gonna go under role and I'm gonna assign another permission for Tony now. So I'm gonna make Tony a developer, right? I'm gonna click save, just to make sure that role got, so now I have the two roles. If I went back to the other browser, hit refresh, can see I'm still an employee only, I'm not developer. As long as this token did not get expired, I'm gonna still an employee. So I'm gonna make that token expire by logging out and logging in again. So you can see now I'm getting the new role. So I'm gonna log out and click login again. And I'm gonna again as Tony. All right. And I'm gonna go to my account page and scroll down. And you can see since that I got the new token, now the new token has the new role that I have. So as you can see here, when I do authorization through the IDP, it doesn't change immediately since I already have the token. And that's actually a drawback for certain use cases. So let's go to the dashboard. And here you can see I have access to those printers. Let's say there's a printer 5 and Alexa's decided to give access to printer 5 to Tony. So what she needs to go on her browser, she can go to Tony and she can say, I want to add printer 5 access that Tony can actually use that printer. So I'm going to click execute now, and that immediately they get the access. So if I click here, refresh, you can see now Tony got access to view that printer. If I updated this to have a new permission to manage the printer, so I'm going back here and I'm going to actually give manage permission now. I'm going to go back to this page and now I'm going to again click on printer 5. You can see immediately they get access to manage that printer. So adding permission, removing permission, it happened immediately. And that's the beauty of using FGA, right? The other thing also, if you want to add a new printers, FG can add cop with us. There is API to add a new entities and start giving it permissions. So I can come here and say, for example, ABC underscore add. So now you can see here, if I refresh, I have a new printer got added to the organization. And Alexis can go to Tony and add for the new printer a permission to use it. So I'm going to execute that now. And you can see here, if I refresh the page, here you go. I got access to printer ABC now to be able to use it. And I still can do the auditing that I was talking about. So you can still now see on the list the printer ABC, and I can actually check who can use it. And you can see here, it's Tony is the only one that got access to use that printer. All right. So hope this demo was good, and we'll see you guys in the next section.